Hello. Back in the 1960s, Farmer Ronald Ray from Burton Pidsey on the Holderness Peninsula, that's that little bit of East Yorkshire that juts out into the North Sea, was walking on his land where his pigs had been rooting, spotted something shiny and picked up a small gold cross. It's about 2 inches high, got a little loop at the top, would have been worn as a pendant. He took it home, washed it, popped it in a drawer. 30 years later, his daughter saw a notice advertising a Finds Identification Day being run by the Portable Antiquities Scheme at Hull Museum, and she took the cross along, and it was identified as a 7th century gold cross with garnet cloisonné work and a central cabochon garnet. Same technique that we saw used on the sword hilts from the Staffordshire hoard and some of the items from the burial grave goods at Sutton Hoo, but here applied to a Christian purpose in the early years of Anglo-Saxon Christianity. An inquest was held, but the coroner decided he couldn't apply the Treasure Act retrospectively, and so it was not defined as treasure under those terms, and it subsequently went to auction. But it was bought by the Ashmolean Museum with the aid of a £50,000 grant from the Art Fund, and it is now on display in Oxford. Now, the year the Holdens Cross came to light, 1998, another interesting Anglo-Saxon discovery was made, this time by a metal detectorist. He was exploring a field near Norwich, and he pursued a faint signal and unearthed a small gold disc. It's about the diameter of a 5p piece, thicker, but that sort of diameter. And it's the bezel from a double-sided seal ring. It was designed to pivot on a pin attached to a finger ring. The ring was missing. On one face there were 2 people. There was a bald, bearded man and a woman with long hair, and between them a cross. On the other side there was another cross, and around the rim was written a name, Boulder Hildis. Now, one side would have been used for sealing official documents and the other side for sealing private correspondence. They are thought to be betrothal rings, and similar examples have been found all from Frankish Gaul, all dating to the 7th century. Frankish Gaul, that area of northeastern poking into central France today. Now, Boulder Hildis, with some spelling variations, was a fairly common Anglo-Saxon name in the 7th century. And the way the name is written, this mix of uppercase majuscule letters and lowercase minuscule letters, is also typical of 7th century Frankish script. So I think we can be reasonably certain that this bezel was made in Frankish Gaul. How did it get to East Anglia? Who did it belong to? It can only have belonged to a woman of the highest royal status. Can we find historical Boulder Hildis of the right time, in the right place and of the right position? Well, yes, we can. It is known today, and better known in France, as Saint Bathilde. This is a statue that's in the Jardin de Luxembourg. There was a life written of Boulder Hildis, but it tells a rather strange story. It tells the story of an Anglo-Saxon slave girl who was sold into the household of a man called Erchinoald at the Frankish court in Paris. Now, Erchinoald was an important official. They didn't use the term, but the best way to describe his position is to say he was like a prime minister, so in an important role. And at the court she caught the eye of King Clovis II, and they married and had 3 children. Now, Clovis II died while the children were still young, and for 7 years Boulder Hildis ruled the Frankish kingdom as a regent. After 7 years she was ousted in a palace coup, and she retired to a convent at Chelles. It's now in the eastern suburbs of Paris. It was outside Paris at the time. But this was a convent that she herself had founded. And one of her last acts before she lost power was to found another convent at a place called Corbie, which is about 10 miles from Amiens. Now it's been argued that whoever wrote this life was dressing up the story, that such a rags to riches story was too extraordinary to believe and that it's unlikely that she was Anglo-Saxon. But it is an Anglo-Saxon name, and a rags to riches rise like this is not without precedent. In the 6th century, the erotic dancer and prostitute Theodora married the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. And Theodora, in power, used her influence to better the lot of what we might today term vulnerable women. This is exactly what Boulder Hildis did, working to free slaves. And it is an Anglo-Saxon name. The convent that she founded at Chelles had close connections with Anglo-Saxon England, a lot of Anglo-Saxon girls trained as nuns at Chelles, and the scriptorium at Chelles had quite a reputation at the time. It's almost certain that somebody from Chelles wrote the life who knew Boulder Hildis and wrote it in the scriptorium at Chelles. So I think there is credibility in the story. How did the seal end up in Norfolk? Now usually when people lose power, their seals are destroyed, prevent them being used fraudulently. And this bezel showed signs of having been forcibly ripped from its mount. But it obviously survived. Was it being carried by a messenger perhaps as identification? Had it been taken as a souvenir by one of the Anglo-Saxon girls training as nuns and brought back to this country? Was it being returned to Boulder Hildis's family? Unanswered questions, but the fact that I think we can, with a reasonable amount of certainty, identify the owner of the bezel is a satisfaction in itself. It was valued by the British Museum under the terms of the Treasure Act at £60,000, and it was acquired by Norwich Castle Museum. Now next week I'm going to stay with the Anglo-Saxon, more spectacular treasure. We're going to look at the grave goods of a man the media liked to call the King of Bling. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons and click on the notification bell to be informed when the next video is published.